Our second reader is a guitarist, writer, and jazz fanatic born in Washington, D.C. After spending nearly a decade navigating the flailing cultural milieu of New York City, he has finally come to terms with his right to lower blood pressure and clearer headspace to pursue more varied creative endeavors. He does this from a happy home in Chicago, which he shares with his wife, a menagerie of aging animals, and a continually expanding array of musical instruments. Please welcome Henri Harps.
Can everyone hear me? You have to pardon me, I'm getting over a cold, so I may sound a little gross. I've written a short story, and I call this "And the Night Took Us In Like Family." Even though the band was swinging, the audience didn't seem to know that they were even there. The matinee crowd was typical white-haired tourists who sat in sedate appreciation, polite but unhip. Other than familiar music, was greeted with taciturn disapproval. And as afternoon turned into evening, the crowd got younger and drunker. Talkers raised their voices, and even the bartenders seemed to click their glasses harder. The band, veteran professionals, took the changing clientele in stride, all except the youngest member, the piano player, who huddled over the keyboard in a violent defensive stance. With a twisted face, he angrily pounded the keyboard, the thunderous chords reverberating through the tight space. Afterwards, he will be admonished by the elders and reminded that he is to be a professional in the strictest sense, and that they don't care who his daddy is, but he could be replaced just like anyone else. He only looked up from the keyboard to stare down patrons and try to intimidate them into silence, but they too paid him no attention. If it wasn't for the fact that his father called in favors to get him this job, plus the decent payday, he would have gotten up in the middle of the song and walked out. Trudging through well-worn chestnuts to an apathetic audience was a waste of his talents. By now, he was supposed to be regarded as a great composer. Private tutoring since the age of 6, 4 years of music school, 5 years of postgraduate study, and 2 memorable years in Berlin studying classical composition and techniques with a famous elderly chain-smoking German composer who on one particularly frigid afternoon, as they huddled over the piano studying fifth species counterpoint retrograde inversion, abruptly asked why a young black American would want to know this ephemera. He had talent and he had education, but that didn't make up for being prickly and difficult. Fortunately, his parents were both prominent and connected, so jobs were easy to come by, even if they weren't prestigious. The set came to a lukewarm end and the club empty. He had the uncomfortable last drink with the band and hurriedly left the club. Outside, he took in the cool air and watched the last of the partiers as they loaded into cabs and left the rapidly emptying street. He huddled under an awning to smoke a cigarette. "Hey, black man," he heard from behind him, but the piano player ignored it. "Yo, black man." The piano player reluctantly turned around and saw a slight man in dirty clothes walking towards him. This guy. Everybody knew this guy. In jest, he was known as the mayor of the block. He was the first person there in the morning and the last person there at night. No one was ever sure if he was homeless or living in the kind of place where being on the street was safer. Whatever he was a fixture in the community, an institution of his own. For good or for bad, he was part of everyone's landscape. He was a scout, a spy, a gossip, a trash talker, a spin doctor, a thief, a security guard for the cheap but intrepid, messenger, the local newspaper. Anything that needed to be known about this block, he knew. Even the police would check with him if they needed information, though he was careful to let everyone know that he wasn't a snitch, which he occasionally was. When the piano player began playing the club, the only word of advice that he was given from his otherwise imprudent colleagues was to avoid this man. He quickly put out his cigarette and tried to hurry around the corner, but it was too late. The stranger caught up with him and flashed a chip-toothed smile. "Stop trying to dog me. I see you all the time, son. You spend time at Bushwick, hang out with that stocky dude, plays bass, walks with his fist balled up all the time." The piano player stared blankly at the man, his mind fiercely trying to get out of the situation. Yeah, man, he's my friend." "Well, not really. I don't know him all that well. We just do some gigs together. Well, used to do gigs. Is there anything I can get for you?" The question was ignored. "I'm Dwight. This is my block. Need something? I got you. My pops was a sax man, played the club you play all the time. He brung me when I was a kid and I never left. Been here my whole life. I keep an eye on things. He opened his arms towards the empty street. This is my family out here. Cool, man. Is your father still around? No, Dwight said reflectively. He ain't around no more. Anyway, I'm glad I ran into you. Can you let a brother hold the 5 spot? I ain't got no money to catch the train to Brooklyn, and I got some business to take care of out there. Somebody's been running their mouth. The piano player had the $5, but felt uneasy about opening his wallet in front of the man, so he lied. Sorry, man, broke musician. I don't even have enough money to take the train. As a matter of fact, I'm walking home. A word? I'll walk with you. I'll take care of my problem tomorrow. Reluctantly, the piano player began walking uptown with Dwight trailing. To break the uncomfortable wall of silence between the two men, Dwight began telling stories of his father and all the famous musicians that used to come in and out of their apartment. He told about his efforts to learn the saxophone, to impress his father, but gave it up after busting his lip in a fight over a girl. Several times, the piano player thought about making a run for the subway or quickly jumping the cab, but around Midtown, Dwight made an offhanded remark about Miles Davis that the piano player simply couldn't ignore, and the two began to bicker over the point. Dwight proved remarkably knowledgeable, and soon the argument turned into decent conversation. They talked of the banality of playing a club where people came to drink and not listen, and they especially talked about why the piano felt unappreciated as a composer. He'd written dozens of compositions for the band, but they were all rejected. The tourists, who'd paid good money, liked standards, so that's what the band played. Dwight proved understanding and even encouraging, and the piano player was absolutely transfixed, the praise going directly to his head. Before they knew it, he stood in front of a glass building in an expensive part of town. Dwight fidgeted nervously and waited for the invitation, and the piano player knew he had little choice. As they crossed the marble lobby to the elevator, the doorman, after seeing Dwight follow, gave a worried look, which the piano player waved off. Upstairs, the piano player got the beer as Dwight pulled out a wide, tightly rolled blunt while settling into the low velvet sofa. He lit the end and in 2 or 3 enormous drags smoked it down to a roach and passed a tiny fragment to his friend, who meekly brought the paper thing to his lips and took a hissing sip, burning his lip immediately. As they felt the heaviness set in, Dwight asked to hear some of the tunes he'd written. The piano player moved over to the baby grand piano, stretched in a grand dramatic gesture, and began assaulting the keyboard with a skittering sawtooth melody and wildly dissonant chord progressions. The piece went on for a long time, and when it was over, he coughed loudly to wake Dwight up. So what do you think? Dwight offered a wide grin. It was noisy, my brother. Noisy? Dissonant, maybe, but certainly not noisy. Did you listen to how I voice-led the 23rd chord using retrograde introversion? It's a fusion of totally new post-Stockhausen harmonic structures with elements of free bop. Dwight let out a chuckling, sympathetic sound. I'm sorry, my brother. I didn't mean to insult you. It just didn't speak to me. I like music that makes me shake my ass, and ain't nobody ever shake their ass to voice leading. The piano player's spirit sunk. Maybe this is a bad idea. I can't help it if you don't get complex music. Besides, it's late. Maybe you should go. Dwight put his hands up. Hold on now. Don't be like that. I'm just telling you how I feel. You're a good player, but your music doesn't speak to me. Do you want people to like it? And this went on all night. A song was played and Dwight criticized. And though the piano player's feelings were hurt, he couldn't help but to feel strangely comfortable around Dwight, who told it like it was, as opposed to the evasions, expositions, and flat-out cross looks that he got from his colleagues. When Dwight fell asleep on the couch, despite the piano player spending nearly an hour trying to get the man to go home, he retired to his bedroom and fell into a deep sleep. He awoke at midday to find Dwight finally gone, along with 2 pairs of shoes, a bundle of bananas, a bottle of very expensive scotch, and $73 in cash, though thankfully the wallet remained. Nights later, the pianist had a dream. He dreamed that he was floating gently across the city. He heard a strange wind, which he immediately recognized as the accumulated noise of machines ground to a fine aural dust and spread across the mechanical landscape. He came to a building and then to a window where 2 people, a man and a woman, were dancing. Each dance step matched perfectly. They spoke no words to each other. Rather, they sang to one another in a wordless, crystalline song. As the pianist grew closer and closer, he began to feel the sensation of falling, waking up before he hit the ground. He sprinted to the piano, and for the next 2 days, taking only occasional breaks for the necessities of life, he composed. When it was done, he stared at the score, trying to shake off the fever dream. He knew that Dwight needed to see this, to understand it. He dressed and took a cab down to the club and searched excitedly for him. He checked with the owner of the bodega, a group of ragamuffin skateboarders, the hunched elderly man who walked his equally hunched elderly dog, but no one had seen him. Checking the park, he found Dwight sitting on the bench, his face haggard and his cheeks were wet. "Dwight, I've been looking for you, man." He pulled the sheet music out and thrust it in his face. "What's this?" Dwight asked. "It's the best thing I ever wrote, and I want to play it for you. Come over to the club with me." "I can't, my brother. The block is hot. I gotta keep watch," and his voice trailed off. "Look, man, I messed up. I need you to hold this for me," and he opened his coat. The pianist saw nothing but the gleam of the handle shining in the phosphorescent light. "I'm sorry," the pianist stammered and began backing away. I can't. I've got too much stake. I can't risk the trouble." Dwight shot him a disappointed look with a tinge of anger, and then sighed. "All right, black man. I get that. I gotta go. It's ill out here. Anyway, you won't see me for a while. I'm gonna be off the block." Just then, they heard the low sound of a creeping engine and footsteps, and they turned to see a dark figure trotting towards them. Panic filled Dwight's large liquid eyes, and he screamed, "Run!" and the pianist took off towards the avenue, though Dwight stayed in place. From down the street, he heard it, 3 sharp staccato eighth notes, punctuated by quarter note rests. There were more footsteps and the peeling of tires. The mayor lay on the sidewalk. After the police left and the official white vans drove off, the pianist returned home. He threw his bloody satchel and clothes onto the piano stool and took a long, hot shower. As he dried himself off, he opened the window and stared blankly. The night, as it is wont to do, rolled impersonally on. Thank you.